Hello and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever. Today is Friday, October 24th, and we're here today to talk about a film that was screened at the Manchester Community Library about a month ago called Gone Guys. It's a movie or film, a 45-minute long film about the struggles and challenges facing young men and men of all ages, I suppose you could say, today. So with us to discuss the film and how it was made and what prompted it all, we're really pleased to be joined by Lauren Curry, who is the executive director of the Richard and Deborah Tarrant Foundation, which is based up in Winooski, Vermont. And Chad Irvin is the creative director of Well Told Films. It's a Vermont-based video production company, and together, along with the Vermont Community Foundation, they produced the film Gone Guys, which as I said, was shown last month down here in Manchester and has a extensive list of screenings coming up around the state and elsewhere. Tonight, for instance, it's going to be shown at the Arlington International Film Festival in Arlington, Massachusetts. Not Arlington, Vermont, but maybe it'll get there one day. Who knows? But anyway, Lauren and Chad, thank you very much for making the time for this conversation. I just wanted to say I found the film really interesting when I went to see it back last month up at the library. It really touched a lot of buttons, I guess you could say, and it built on my feelings about reading the book that Richard Reeves wrote on pretty much the same subject, and we'll be talking a bit about that as well. But I guess just to kind of get us started, Lauren, let me start with you and just ask, what gave you and the other members of your team at the Tarrant Foundation the idea to do the film? And how did the whole process start?
Well, first, let me say thank you so much for having us here today, and thank you for coming to watch the film. For us at the Tarrant Foundation, this has been a conversation that we've been having for the last 20 years. I remember, decades ago, Rich Tarrant really being concerned about what he thought he was perceiving in terms of shifting dynamics in the experience for boys in school. And I think for us and the Vermont Community Foundation, both of us, we are statewide grant makers. We have nonprofit partners all over the state and work with communities all over the state. And through that process, both of us as organizations, we've been looking at the data for a long time, and we've been listening to the stories that people are telling us in communities around the state about what they're experiencing. And we felt like part of our roles as foundations, one of our roles is to help frame conversations that can be difficult to have, and that it's not necessarily anyone's job to have. So we felt like when Richard Reeves's book came out, that felt like an opportunity moment to help Vermont understand, help us learn more about what was happening, learn more about the data, and really critically learn how to talk about it. So bringing Richard Reeves to Vermont to speak was kind of the first step in that process. And it was during the planning for that we started thinking about how, no matter how many people were able to participate in that event, it would still be, a couple of days in just one part of the state. And we felt like this conversation deserved a deeper dive. And we really wanted to explore, Reeves does a great job framing the national data. And we really wanted to take a deeper dive into what's Vermont's experience of this national crisis. And how can we support Vermonters to tell their own story as relates to that crisis? And that's where the idea from the film really started.
And Chad, as Lauren mentioned, one of the things I found most interesting about the movie was that it was all totally set in Vermont. You don't always see that, and here we were taking a national question and making it Vermont centric. I guess I just wondered, when you and your film crews were going around the state, what were you hearing from the people you were talking to, or what were some of the challenges around filming it that you encountered and had to overcome?
Well, I think you touched on something that was actually really important to me and important to us as filmmakers is this issue that Reeves talks about is disproportionately affects both Black boys and boys who live in rural areas. And so for us, it was really important as filmmakers, as rural filmmakers, to tell a story that affects rural populations and tell it ourselves as opposed to waiting for a national source to parachute in a crisis or something like that, you know. So I would say from a big picture standpoint, that I think is really important as rural filmmakers, that we're tackling large issues and seeing how it plays out in our neighborhoods. And accepting a bit of agency that we can do that and we should be doing that. As we went around the state, both before we actually even pulled a camera out, this was like 2 years ago, we started the researching process with Lauren and with the Philippe from the Community Foundation, just sort of conceptualizing this. And one of the things that when you work in documentary films, or you're at a dinner party or something like that, one of the interesting things is you're always working on something different. So people are always asking you, oh, what are you working on? What are you working on next? And so when I would tell people that we were working on the problems of boys and young men, they were often surprised and a bit hesitant to talk about it. But we always I found that taking a cue from the way Reeves talks about the issue by first sort of contextualizing it with data, it helped in my conversations with people when I would talk with them about this. And what we really quickly found is that once that initial sort of hesitance went away, people very often had encountered this in their own lives with their child, with their grandchild, or with others in their neighborhood. And this mirrored the process of as we went around filming. The process of filming is very long. There's a whole lot of planning, and for us, the planning was reaching out, talking to people who we might want to film with, and building a relationship with them ahead of time, so that there's that comfort when we show up with the cameras, and it's that nervous sort of camera in your face situation, that we have a little bit of a relationship, and one built on trust, where we've set an opportunity for people who are going to be participants in the film to ask us questions. What are your goals? To let us know what they're nervous about, and to be open with them and bring them into the process. But I found that as we went around, the process of filming very much mirrored those early conversations I had, where there was a bit of nervousness and then a sort of dam breaking of people just really wanting to share.
Interesting.
Well, and I was so interested for us, I've never been involved in making a film before. So this was all a learning experience for me. And I'll have to say I got to do a little bit of that fly on the wall of watching Chad make this film. And, to me, the experience of watching how he both really became a student of the topic, so did tons of research and really made himself fluent in the topic. But then his approach to both storytelling and this relationship building that he's talking about, like the ability to sit down, with teenagers especially, and be able to have authentic conversations about personal experiences, that's a real gift. And I think it was something really special that this film team managed to do. And I think they treated it as a really kind of sacred activity.
Well, before we go any further, let's watch a little bit of a clip from the film. This is a trailer that was produced. Gives you an idea of kind of what the movie's all about. Let's have a watch.
It's not a fun thing really to be a young man right now. Like, there's a lot of criticism and there's a lot of isolation.
There are still a huge number of issues that we still need to tackle for women and girls. And there are a growing number of issues where we have to pay more attention now to boys and men. And we have to do both those things at once.
My experience in school, I got in trouble a lot. Went to the principal's office quite a bit. I felt very alone, and I just felt no one understood me.
So many of these kids that I've worked with who have trouble relating to school do just amazing things at home. What is it that we do in schools that causes that drive to learn to go away?
The gender gap in college degrees. In 1971-72, there was a 13 percentage point gap in favour of men. The catch-up was rapid. So there's now a bigger than Title IX level gender gaps in higher education now, but reversed.
This is the quiet conversation that educators have had for some time.
However we're preparing young people, it is not working as well for boys.
We also see this crisis among men playing out at a psychological level.
I just didn't really care about having a future. I was just like, whatever happens is gonna happen.
My father grew up with his father basically telling him, you're a man, men don't cry. So I just felt so, isolated.
A lot of men feel like they have quite a long list of things they know not to do. They don't have a very good list of things they should do.
What is taught, what is more focused on is what we're calling toxic masculinity.
We encourage men, go get engaged as a dad and talk about your feelings, but then we don't create those spaces.
I want to model what it should be to be not only a dad, but just a man in today's world, period.
Men aren't good about saying, I'm not doing well and I need to talk to someone. We have to be able to entertain that conversation of, we need to go get you some help.
I think sometimes things happen and they just continue to happen. And you don't sort of stop and say, oh, here's this trend, we can do something about it.
Nice job, Dusty. Yeah. Before you get frustrated, remember how much better you've gotten already, Hey, I gotta work on my firm handshake, bro. Woo! All right, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States.
If we don't want young men and boys to feel like the only people talking about the issues that are affecting them for real are those who are perhaps on the more reactionary side, whether it's left or right, but more reactionary, then it's up to us. That is our failing, not theirs.
Asking the question, what can you do tomorrow, is really important. It's not going to be one thing, it's going to be hundreds of things.
This is a subject that didn't really receive a whole lot of attention, at least none that I was aware of anyway. I probably could have missed it all. But Lauren, why do you think Richard Reeves's book made such an impact? It was published in 2023, I think. It would have been a year or so before he came up to UVM and spoke at the conference that you folks organized. But, I don't remember hearing a whole lot about this issue before that book was published, but it really made a splash. And clearly his talk was very well attended there at UVM. Why do you think that was so?
I think he would be quick to point to the long list of people before him who have, explored this topic, done really important research on the issue, written very powerful and meaningful books. I think a difference with what he did was, I know, like I mentioned earlier, that our foundation's been working on this issue for a long time, but I think a lot of the materials that we were using felt most at home in particular settings. For example, like in academic settings. So often they were kind of professional books that were written for professional audiences, or they, I think, fell into kind of like the parenting resource category. And there was something about what Reeves did that for us felt like it really brought the conversation into a more generalized public space. And the book is accessible. It's a very data-heavy book, but it's really accessible to read. It is very thoughtful. You can, you can tell that it's important to him to, the why behind writing the book was really important to him. And I think there was also something of a moment, where, for whether it was that we were far enough beyond, the kind of lockdown months and years, or, we were starting to see some of those impacts from the pandemic so starkly in the learning experiences of our kids. There was just something about that moment and the way he writes and the way he speaks and approaches the topic that made it feel safe to join this conversation. And he makes it feel both safe and imperative to talk about this issue of equity alongside all of the other really important equity conversations that society is having, along with, not instead of. And I think that there was something in that approach that really made it possible for a lot of us to have some conversations for the first time.
Mm. Chad, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think this came out of, some kind of background context, or was it a whole new thing?
Well, I mean, I had to read a bunch of the books that came before Richard Reeves before we started filming, so it's hard for me to forget them too. I think that Reeves does a really good way of the way he doesn't just deliver the information as an expert. He's very transparent about the data. As he's delivering the case, says, this is the data, this is what this means. He really spells it out really well, which I think is what Lauren is driving at, is a reason why, though it's data heavy, it is accessible. You can read it and you're like, oh yeah, I understand what that means. And he very clearly sources it. He's not saying, trust me because I'm the expert. It's, here is the data, let me sort of break it down for you in a very clear way, which I think really resonated. Also, the fact that the timing, being when it is, being that everyone was much more conversant online. Reeves has done a really good job of engaging both traditional media sources and being on podcasts. He almost like now it seems like he's everywhere. Like he really since he came to Vermont, it's like sort of just rocketed upward. It's I see him on a different media source each week, it feels like. But I think that is really it, and I think that he hit it at a time when maybe for a lot of parents and teachers, some of this stuff it was a bit raw because of the pandemic times. A lot of us, Lauren and I think the entire filmmaking team, the core team, are all parents, so we lived through and survived the homeschooling, and the teachers were then had been dealing a couple of years with this sort of behavioral and sort of counseling sort of needs that had skyrocketed in the years after the lockdown time. And so I think everyone had sort of hit this point where it's like they were very receptive to talking about it, and it very much hit home. This, especially for parents and anyone in education, was just immediately like, thank God someone is talking about that. And they said it about Reeves' book, and they said it when we went around filming. They're the people we didn't have to convince at all about the filming process. We said we're doing a film about the challenges boys are facing in education, and after that, and they're just like, oh my goodness, thank you. Finally, someone's doing this.
Yeah, I think we all talk though about how we've noticed a shift in, just from the time when we started the project to, when we were first ready to screen it. it felt like the tone shifted around the topic. And, whereas in the beginning, as Chad was describing, you would mention it to somebody at a barbecue and there was a little bit of a like, and that feeling has changed in just the last, 18 months or 2 years. And I think, even from a planning perspective, 6 months ago, when we were imagining what the rollout for the film would look like, we were really thinking through how we would allocate promotional resources, to try to get people to want to watch this film. And we've pretty quickly shifted gears on that and are realizing that that's not our challenge. Our challenge is, how do we respond to all the people who do want to see the film? It's a very different capacity challenge.
I would say that another thing that happened sort of in that time period was a really increased coverage in national media and in popular consciousness of around this issue generally, but especially around problems that were coming up with online influencers. And all of these things sort of relate together. People being at home all the time in the pandemic, being totally connected to their phones. And then this sort of growth of these influencers online who are purporting a certain vision of masculinity that is being channeled onto these young men's mobile devices that there's just ever present. There's like a show on Netflix about it, and there's it seems to be everywhere. My other filmmakers I know are jealous of our champagne problems, say, joke that we have with so many people coming out to the screenings and wanting to engage with us, because it's like it just seems like there's a new headline every few days. I think I was doing a radio interview a few weeks ago, and in the morning I went and sat down, and there was like a new cover story on New York Times about it.
Well, I was wondering, Lauren, I guess I'll throw this to you first. What has been some of the reactions you've been hearing in the sort of the post-screening conversations that you've had, the panel discussions? The one that you had here in Manchester with the 4 people on the panel was quite fascinating. I guess, number one, have you been doing those kinds of panel discussions at every screening, or you have? Okay. So what's been some of the reaction from the audience that has come out of both watching the movie and the panel discussion that followed it?
Yeah, that's a great and a huge question. So the film is designed to support conversation. So it's 45 minutes long, and we were really intentional about that because we wanted people to be able to sit down and watch the film and also engage in some real discussion about it, whether at a community setting like the Manchester Library, or at a professional development setting at a school, or a conference, or a training session at an employer. So that part was really particular. And our approach for the screenings has been to engage with local partners wherever we go, and have, work with those local partners to think about, who might they be interested in seeing on that panel. So, for example, at that one, we were so fortunate. We had 2 young men, 2 juniors from the local high school were there with us. We had a school counselor there with us, and then we had a mental health professional was also a part of that event. And, I think something that we've done when I remember, is to, each time we go somewhere, we kind of do a little straw poll in the audience just to find out, like, who's here. Raise your hand if you're here as a student, or as an educator, or a parent, or someone who's in one of the helping professions. And it's been fascinating because we have seen a huge turnout from educators and a huge turnout from parents, along with, kind of everybody else. But I think that, that night, it felt like a lot of and I'm interested to hear what you think about this, but it felt like that night, I was especially interested in the 2 students and what their experience of the conversation was and how they felt when they left. And I thought that the 2 of them, first of all, they shared really, powerfully and authentically about their experiences, in a way that I think surprised some of the people in the audience, including, there was at least one person who mentioned that he knew these students well, and was surprised to hear some of what they had to say. And I felt like the two boys were, they seemed very kind of positive after the experience, and I felt like encouraged, and were receiving a lot of positive feedback from the audience. So, to me, that's a best case event where it is, we don't want the film to be about experts talking at. We don't want it to be sort of an outside perspective at a Vermont community. We want it to be an opportunity for all of our communities to share with one another. And I think that's been the most powerful part of the experience. And it has been fascinating to watch it unfold in audiences of vastly different sizes. I think that night we had actually one of our smaller audiences. There were maybe 50 people there. The night before that event, I had been in Brattleboro where there were, I think, 200 people in a very large venue at that one. And we've had kind of everything in between. We've played with different ways to engage the conversation. We tried some texting conversation. We've tried to create sort of lots of avenues for people. But I think the most common feedback, maybe, and Chad, I'm interested to hear if you think this is accurate. I feel like the most common bits of feedback that we've had are a bit of relief, sort of like agitated relief at being given the opportunity to talk about this. People are coming with feelings about what they're seeing and experiencing in their own lives. So I think the sort of energy about wanting to dive into the conversation has been present everywhere that we've gone. And I think if there has been criticism of the film, it's often from that place of, I wish there had been more about, I wish we had gotten to see more about this particular slice of the topic or how this group is affected by it, which I take again as really encouraging. It's folks who want to go further into the conversation, not to limit it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's been really fascinating too, because we've been in lots of different areas of the state, a whole wide slice of, different people in every sort of way, and hearing the different ways. Each discussion afterwards has a different sort of energy to it. I really liked like some of them. They get like somewhat pretty emotional. If someone early on shares and takes it to an emotional place, then a lot of times everyone else sort of builds on that, and it becomes this really powerful moment of sharing. And we've had others like in Bellows Falls where people were extremely pragmatic and sort of said, okay, listen, what are we going to do about this? Let's walk out of here tomorrow, and here's my email address, and let's start a program about this. Which is great. All of these things. It's been really fun. And a lot of times, that's what our best case scenario when you make a film. You're like, I'm going to make this, and then, people can just take it and run with it. But often that doesn't happen. You're often having to sort of prompt and cue and cajole. And like, it has not been the case on this one. It has been like, we usually, Lauren and Angela, the producer, and I, we're just sort of like step back and it just like let it take a life of its own. It's amazing. And I'd say like one of the cool things that we did intentionally that speaks to what Lauren was saying before is we didn't dive thoroughly down into any of the places we visited in the film because we're trying to cover the topic in a way that cues up a conversation or cues you up for a conversation later. We've had reports of people who their book clubs, they ended up talking about the film instead of their book the next week. But so we're now releasing on the website and on social media deeper dives into each of the locations and programs that we visited, and that has been getting a big response from people as well, where we were able to show, okay, we visited briefly this program in the Northeast Kingdom. Here's actually what the entire program does. Here is, a larger discussion in the masculinity class in Montpelier, and you really get a sense of the flow of the conversation. and the energy and just the powerful, the value that class had for those boys, and how they're taking that out and applying it in the world beyond that. And it's really I think it really is encouraging, that one especially, and so we're continuing to roll those out so that if I'm an educator and I show the film, and maybe I want some things that really specifically relate more to my area of focus, there will be some other materials that they can pull in addition to our sort of discussion guides and stuff like that.
Well, before we have to run, I just wanted to ask you both what takeaways or what new ideas did you come away with after working on the project and seeing the movie, in terms of how do we fix this, or what are some of the pathways out of the situation where so many young men feel like they don't really know what they're supposed to be when they grow up, or whatever, or the traditional role that their fathers or grandfathers may have played in family life, and being a provider and all the rest somehow is a little murkier than it may have been 40, 50, 60 years ago. I guess did you both have some new reflections that you hadn't thought about before after watching it all? And Lauren, I'll start with you.
Oh yeah, I mean it's been a start to finish learning experience on that front, and I think that for me, I've learned a few things. One is, and this a little bit goes back to the kind of what are the takeaways that audience members are experiencing. We've received a number of emails after our screening events where somebody has told us they've shared about something that happened afterward. And in one case, it was shown in a youth setting, and the adult there said, and the next day, several of these young people came forward and asked for help. They asked for more support, asked for a connection to some mental health support services. So for me, one takeaway is when you create space for this vulnerable conversation with young people and a trusted adult, you literally have the power to save lives. That's one, is this for too many kids is a life and death situation, and that something as simple as openness and space and shared vulnerability can save a life. And then I think that from a systems perspective and a program perspective, something that's been really helpful for me to think about is, one, just how we think about data. And do the data that we collect about all kinds of different things, are we collecting data in a way that reveals issues like this? And if not, can we? And then that in so many cases, it feels like a next step isn't even sort of special or unique or additional services for boys and men. It's simply equal support and equal services for boys and men. We have a number of things at a statewide and a systems level that are specific to the needs of girls and women, which are so important and have made such a difference. I think about the example of like men in the nursing profession, and in 1980, it was 6 or 7% of the nursing profession was male, and now that's up to 15 or 16%. And that's through focused attention and effort. And it has made a difference. And I think about, if we've got programs that are, we've got, different, we've got a Commission on Girls and Women, we've got the Vermont Women's Fund, which are doing imperative work, powerful work. And I am imagining what we could do if we had sort of parallel resources for boys and men and the issues that they face.
Yeah, I think that I like that. One of the things that was interesting, connecting the different little dots as we went around, I think a lot of the programs that are having success, very much one of the first things they'll say is you got to listen. You don't tell the boys what they need. Listen to them. Ask them, what are you interested in? And then build on that. Not, hey, we've come up with a solution for you. Here you go. Here's a program. Sign up. You know, if they're not interested in the topic, if you're not engaging it in some sort of way with what they care about, then they're not going to show up and they're not going to benefit. I think that a lot of times also in that sense, like engaging them and guiding the focus, self-led sort of activities is really is helpful also. I think that to your other point about this sort of sense in boys and young men about like being adrift, trying to figure out what it is, what is healthy masculinity, what it means to be a man today is a really important question. And I didn't want to dodge that one in our film, because I think that it's sort of the root sort of cause that all of this is sort of coming from. And I think that one of the things that we're hoping to do is to encourage people to engage this topic and not shy away from it, because there are people out here there talking about it, and they're not necessarily giving advice that is super helpful for young men to hear. So the more of us that are out there and we're talking about, you know, masculinity or, you know, healthy masculinity or what, you know, for me, it is important about being a man, you know, the more sort of, as Richard Reeves would say, boring people out there saying, yes, this is also being a man, being out there, doing things, caring for people, supporting your community. It's important for those voices to be out there and for us not shy away from just being out and being a visible part of that conversation also. And I think that between those two things, between thinking about the programs and thinking about this larger philosophical sort of question, I think that the key thing that is the through line there is that young men want to be part, they want to connect to a sense of meaning. And so in finding their interests and catering toward it, what we're hoping to do is we're looking to try and help these people find a pursuit in life, a pathway in life, so that they feel connected to their community, so they feel connected to purpose, and that they're doing something of value. And I think that is the connecting thread between those two things. And I think that as we say in the film, as we say at screenings, there's not a solution that, and it's part of the reason why we step back at the screenings. That's a question for you, the audience. That is, what is helpful in your community? What is going to be helpful for you in St. Johnsbury may not be helpful to someone in Burlington or, you know, in Pomfret or, you know, wherever else. So I think that everyone needs to also take that question on themselves. You know, what am I seeing in my community? Where are people needing support, and where can I help? It's not, you know, so we all have a sense of agency in this. I can do something. I can help the kids in my neighborhood. I can help boys here in Montpelier, and I can help my son. You know, so what can we do tomorrow that can help? Not waiting for a big solution to come in and fix everything.
Well, we'll have to leave it there for today. Unfortunately, this is such a fascinating subject. I have a feeling we could talk for quite a while longer about it all. But anyway, the film is Gone Guys, and it was produced by the Tarrant Foundation, the Vermont Community Foundation, and Well Told Films, of which Chad Irvin is the creative director. Lauren Curry is the executive director of the Tarrant Foundation. And again, I want to thank you both for making the time for the conversation to talk about the film. As we said earlier, the film is being screened in many locations around Vermont this coming month in November. You can go, I guess, on both the Tarrant Foundation website and Well Told Films website and get a list of where those screenings are.
GoneGuysFilm.com.
What is that again? Film?
GoneGuysFilm.com.
GoneGuysFilm.com. Okay. There you have it. But if it's showing up somewhere in your neighborhood, is definitely, I think, worth making the time to go have a watch. So, again, thank you both, Lauren and Chad, and thanks to all of you who've been with us, and we'll see you again the next time. Take care.